There is a quiet power in the soul of one who no longer needs validation, attention, or even company to feel whole. Carl Jung understood this deeply when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To need no one is not a rejection of connection, but rather a homecoming to the self, a state where inner fullness replaces the ache of loneliness. It is in this space of wholeness that something remarkable happens. People are naturally drawn to you. Like a wellspring that flows effortlessly, your self-sufficiency radiates warmth and assurance, inviting others to drink from your peace. Jung observed that the individuation process, the journey of becoming oneself, creates an aura that others can sense, even if unconsciously. In your contentment, others find safety. In your detachment, others seek closeness. It is not because you possess something they lack, but because you remind them of what they too are capable of becoming. In a world desperate for belonging and approval, to stand quietly fulfilled is a magnetism few can resist. You become a mirror not of their emptiness, but of their potential. And in this way, when you need no one, everyone needs you. Not to complete them, but to awaken in themselves the possibility of being whole. Dear everyone, before we continue the program, if you enjoy this topic, please comment number 1. If you'd like me to create more similar content, comment number 2. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any useful videos. Thank you and wish you all meaningful moments. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly attract admiration, respect, and even love without trying? Why is it that those who appear least concerned with being needed often end up being the ones everyone turns to? If you've ever felt like you're chasing after connections only to feel more disconnected, you're not alone. There's a quiet frustration in constantly needing validation, in hoping that someone will see your worth, your presence, your uniqueness. Yet the more you seek it, the more it seems to slip away. What if the key isn't in needing others to need us? What if the deepest secret to being wanted, respected, and even loved lies in needing no one at all? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and father of analytical psychology, had profound insights into this very paradox. He believed that the journey inward, what he called individuation, was the most critical path any human could take. To individuate is to become whole within yourself, to integrate every shadow, desire, and weakness into a complete, authentic being. Jung didn't just speak of self-reliance or independence. He spoke of an inner completeness that transforms a person into a kind of gravitational center. As Jung famously said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And when you finally step into that true self, something extraordinary happens. People are drawn to you, not because you need them, but because you remind them of what they long for in themselves. This video on galactic wisdom will take you deep into the heart of this paradox. We'll explore why needing no one actually makes everyone need you through the lens of Jungian psychology, timeless philosophy, and human experience. You'll discover the hidden forces that operate beneath our social instincts and emotional needs. And perhaps by the end of this journey, you'll see why the person who needs no one becomes the one the world cannot ignore. So if you've ever asked yourself, why do I feel invisible no matter how much I give? Or why are some people so magnetic without even trying? Stay with us. The answers might just change how you see yourself and how the world sees you. 1. The invisible chase. Why needing others pushes them away. Have you ever noticed that the more desperately you need someone's attention, affection, or approval, the more distant they seem to become? It's as if people can sense your craving and instinctively pull away, like an unspoken law of emotional physics. Many of us have experienced this dynamic, whether in romantic relationships, friendships, or even professional circles. You want to be seen, to be appreciated, yet somehow, the harder you try, the more invisible you feel. Carl Jung's philosophy gives us a profound lens through which to understand this. Jung believed that human beings have an unconscious radar, what he called the collective unconscious, that picks up on deeper psychological states. When you need someone to fill a void within you, that need radiates like a silent frequency. Even if you're not saying it aloud, people can feel it. This is not about logic or conscious awareness. It's about the energy we emit. And Jung understood that the psyche communicates beyond words. When you need others to validate you, what you're unconsciously declaring is that you are incomplete. You're signaling a gap, a deficiency, a hunger that must be satisfied by something or someone outside of you. But human relationships are rarely comfortable with this kind of dependency. We might say we want to feel needed, but when we encounter someone who is emotionally dependent on us, our instinct is often to retreat. Why? Because it feels like a burden, an obligation, and a risk. Jung suggested that what truly draws people together is psychic wholeness. The presence of a person who is internally complete, who doesn't need you to fill their gaps. Such a person exudes a different kind of energy. They are with you because they choose to be, not because they need to be. And that choice feels liberating to others, not suffocating. This is not a call to become cold or detached. On the contrary, Jungian psychology emphasizes integrating all aspects of the self, including the need for connection. But connection born from completeness feels vastly different than connection born from craving. Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." This loneliness is not about physical presence, but about an inner disconnection with oneself. When you're disconnected within, your outward connections suffer. You look for people to fix your internal fractures, but no one can do that work for you. And when you ask them to, consciously or not, you push them away because that's not a role anyone can play sustainably. There's an ancient paradox here. When you are whole within yourself, people feel safe with you. You become a sanctuary, not a project. Others are drawn to the peace you carry because it reflects a peace they desire in themselves. They are not drawn because you need them, but because your very presence reminds them of what is possible when the self is fully embraced. In everyday life, we see this with individuals who seem magnetic without trying. They walk into a room and people notice. They speak sparingly, yet their words are weighed with gravity. Why? Because they are not chasing approval. They are not fishing for attention. They have anchored themselves in their own being. This is why Jung emphasized the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating all facets of the self, including the parts we deny, the shadows we ignore, and the fears we suppress. As you integrate, you fill the spaces within that once cried out for others to fix. And ironically, it is then, in your self-sufficiency, that others begin to need you, not as a crutch, but as a mirror to their own potential. In this way, the chase ends. You no longer need to run after connection because you have already connected with yourself. And those around you, they start walking your way, not because you asked, but because they want to feel what you found. 2. The magnetic field of wholeness, what Jung called individuation. To understand why needing no one draws everyone towards you, we must dive deeper into one of Carl Jung's most foundational concepts, individuation. For Jung, individuation wasn't just a psychological process. It was the very path to becoming fully alive, fully human. But what does it really mean to individuate? And how does this inner process create an outer magnetism that seems to pull others effortlessly into your orbit? Individuation, in Jungian terms, is the process of integrating every aspect of your being into a cohesive whole. It's about bringing the unconscious into consciousness, embracing both light and shadow, and reconciling the many conflicting parts within us. Most of us live fragmented lives. We show certain parts of ourselves to the world, hide others, deny some, and remain completely unaware of many. We wear masks, or as Jung called it, the persona, to navigate society. But beneath the mask lies a deeper, more authentic self, waiting to be realized. Jung wrote, "The individuation process is a process of differentiation, having for its goal the development of the individual personality. It is not about becoming someone else or an ideal version of yourself. It's about becoming who you already are beneath the layers of conditioning, trauma, and social expectation. This journey inward is not easy. It requires us to confront our shadow, those parts of ourselves that we reject or repress because they're too painful, too shameful, or too chaotic to face. Yet ironically, the very parts we hide hold the key to our wholeness." Jung believed that by integrating the shadow, we reclaim the energy, creativity, and vitality that have been locked away. When you begin to individuate, you gradually dissolve the unconscious need for others to fill your gaps. You no longer seek relationships to complete you, because you are in the process of completing yourself. You're not perfect. Individuation is a lifelong journey, but you become self-possessed, aware of who you are, and at peace with both your gifts and your flaws. And this is where the magnetism emerges. A person who is individuated doesn't crave your approval, yet they honor your presence. They don't need your validation, yet they appreciate your company. This balance is profoundly attractive because it feels genuine. There's no hidden agenda, no silent plea to be rescued or praised. They stand as a whole, and that wholeness creates a gravitational pull. Think about the people you admire most, not because of their popularity or status, but because of their essence. Chances are, these individuals seem deeply rooted in themselves. They may speak with clarity, act with integrity, and carry a calm that others find grounding. You don't feel pressure to fix them or complete them. Instead, you feel uplifted simply by being around them. Jung viewed this state as the pinnacle of psychological health. But more than that, it aligns with ancient philosophical traditions. In Taoism, for instance, the concept of wu-wei, effortless action, speaks to a similar truth. When you are aligned within, you flow with life rather than force it. People, opportunities, and relationships come to you not because you chase them, but because you become a vessel of alignment. Moreover, when you individuate, you develop a deeper connection to the self, a term Jung used to describe the totality of the psyche, encompassing both conscious and unconscious elements. The self is the archetype of wholeness, and the more you connect with it, the more your life begins to radiate that completeness outward. People may not understand it intellectually, but they feel it intuitively. This is why the phrase, "when you need no one, everyone needs you," is not a social trick or psychological hack. It's the natural byproduct of a person who has walked the hard road inward and emerged carrying their own light. And in a world full of people searching for meaning, security, and authenticity, that light is irresistible. To individuate is to declare silently but powerfully, "I am enough." And when you live from that place, others don't come to save you. They come to witness, to learn, and sometimes to begin their own journey back to themselves. 3. The shadow within. Integrating what we hide. To grasp the full depth of needing no one and yet being needed by everyone, we have to confront a difficult truth that Carl Jung emphasized repeatedly. Every one of us carries a shadow. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, refers to the parts of ourselves that we reject, suppress, or ignore, the traits we deem unacceptable, the emotions we fear, the impulses we deny. It is not evil by nature, but it is dangerous when left unconscious. Jung famously wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The shadow operates in the dark recesses of our psyche, influencing our behavior, choices, and relationships without our awareness. And here's the paradox. The more we deny the shadow within us, the more we unconsciously seek others to compensate for what we refuse to own. Consider this: when you feel chronically incomplete, craving admiration, love, or attention from others, often it is because some part of you has been exiled within your own mind. You've pushed away your anger, your desires, your ambitions, or even your brilliance, because somewhere along the way, you were taught that these parts were unacceptable. Yet the psyche abhors a vacuum. What you refuse to integrate within yourself, you will search for desperately in others. This is why relationships formed from need often carry an invisible weight. When you need someone to make you feel worthy, strong, or lovable, you are, in effect, outsourcing the parts of yourself you haven't yet claimed. And while this may work temporarily, it's ultimately unsustainable. No one can permanently shoulder the burden of being your missing pieces. Jung's path of individuation insists that to become whole, we must confront the shadow, not to eradicate it, but to integrate it. This means acknowledging the traits, emotions, and tendencies you'd rather not admit you have. It means embracing your vulnerability, your jealousy, your pride, your rage, recognizing that these are human experiences, not moral failings. When you bring these parts into consciousness, you transform them. The anger you feared becomes assertiveness. The jealousy you denied becomes clarity about your desires. The pride you rejected becomes healthy self-worth. In other words, the shadow becomes fuel for your growth rather than a chain holding you back. What does this have to do with needing no one? Everything. When you've integrated your shadow, you are no longer walking around as a fragmented being, searching for someone to complete you. You become psychologically sovereign. You own your strengths and weaknesses, your light and darkness. You no longer need someone to validate you because you validated yourself by embracing the totality of who you are. And here is where the magnetism arises. People are drawn to those who have made peace with their shadow. Why? Because such individuals feel real, grounded, and authentic. They are not pretending to be flawless. Instead, they embody wholeness. In their presence, others feel seen, not because these individuals offer solutions, but because their very being radiates a permission to be whole. You may have met someone like this, a person who isn't the loudest in the room, who doesn't dominate conversations, yet whose presence feels undeniably strong. You can sense that they are at peace with themselves, that they have faced their inner demons and come out with self-knowledge. Such people often become natural leaders, mentors, or confidants, not because they seek followers, but because people seek their authenticity. Moreover, integrating the shadow also cultivates self-compassion. When you face your own darkness, you become less judgmental of others. This open-heartedness makes you approachable and trustworthy. People intuitively gravitate toward those who won't shame or reject them for their flaws, precisely because these individuals have stopped shaming themselves. Jung called this the path to the self, the deeper center of the psyche that transcends the ego and unites all parts of the personality. When you operate from the self, you are no longer driven by the unconscious need to be filled by others. Instead, you engage with people from a place of fullness. This is the quiet paradox. The person who has embraced their shadow, who no longer needs anyone to patch up their brokenness, becomes the very person others feel magnetically drawn to. It's not about perfection, it's about integration. And in a world where most people are running from their own shadows, someone who stands whole, light and dark embraced, is a beacon. Thus, when you need no one, everyone needs you. Not to complete them, but to remind them that they too can be whole. 4. From attachment to autonomy. Breaking the need for external validation. At the heart of our social experience lies a deep human craving, validation. We want to know we matter. We want someone to say, "You're enough," or "You're worthy." This desire is not inherently wrong. After all, we are social beings wired for connection. But when validation becomes the cornerstone of our self-worth, it morphs into a dangerous dependency. It turns relationships into transactions where we unconsciously barter our authenticity for approval. Carl Jung's work reveals that seeking constant validation is a sign of a fragmented psyche, where the ego, the conscious mind, searches desperately for external anchors because it lacks a secure connection to the deeper self. Jung warned that when the ego is cut off from the self, it becomes inflated, fragile, and easily wounded. Without that inner anchor, we become overly susceptible to the opinions, judgments, and expectations of others. Think about how social media amplifies this dynamic today. A single post can garner likes, comments, and shares, triggering a fleeting sense of worth. But when the dopamine fades, so does the feeling of being enough. The cycle restarts, each time with a deeper hunger for external affirmation. In this way, needing others becomes a psychological addiction, a craving to be seen because we cannot yet see ourselves. But here's the liberating truth Jung offers. The only lasting validation comes from within, and to reach it, one must shift from attachment to autonomy. This is not emotional isolation or a rejection of human connection. It's a psychological emancipation from the need to be completed by others. Autonomy means you can enjoy connection without being enslaved by it. You can appreciate praise without depending on it. You can face rejection without crumbling. You don't need everyone to like you because your sense of self is not up for negotiation. You've made peace with your own worth, and that peace is unshakable. But how do we cultivate such autonomy? Jung believed that deep introspection, shadow work, and the exploration of the unconscious were key. He advocated for engaging with symbols, dreams, and active imagination, tools that help bridge the gap between the ego and the self. By interpreting our dreams and confronting our unconscious material, we begin to understand the parts of us that crave validation, the stories we've inherited, and the fears that drive our need for approval. For example, A recurring dream where you're invisible in a crowd may reflect an unconscious belief that you don't matter unless others affirm your presence. By bringing this belief to consciousness, you can begin to question it. Why do I feel invisible? Whose voice within me decided I am not enough on my own? In doing so, you reclaim your narrative. This process is not quick. It requires patience, honesty, and a willingness to feel uncomfortable truths. But each step toward autonomy diminishes the compulsion to seek external validation. Instead, relationships become spaces of genuine exchange rather than dependency. And here's where the paradox unfolds again. When you no longer need validation, people begin to offer it freely. When you are self-possessed, others respect you, not because you demanded it, but because self-respect commands recognition. You stop playing the game of people-pleasing, and in turn, others are drawn to your authenticity. Consider the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are. They don't boast. They don't seek the spotlight. Yet their presence speaks volumes. People naturally gravitate toward them, eager to understand their secret. The secret, of course, is that there is no secret. Only a person who has become whole, who walks through the world needing nothing from anyone, yet offering everything through their presence. Jung summarized this beautifully when he said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But in that terrifying acceptance comes freedom, the freedom to engage with life and others not from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. Thus, when you need no one, everyone needs you, not to patch up their wounds, but because your autonomy inspires their own. In your self-sufficiency, others see a glimpse of the strength they yearn to cultivate within themselves. 5. The power of presence, becoming the anchor in a drifting world. In a world where so many people are emotionally adrift, desperate for stability and a sense of grounding, there is something profoundly magnetic about a person who carries an unshakable presence. This presence doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply is, steady, rooted, and undeniable. Carl Jung understood that presence arises not from ego, but from alignment with the deeper self. It is the silent power of someone who has done the inner work, integrated their shadow, and no longer carries the desperation to be completed by others. And in a society obsessed with appearances, superficial success, and curated perfection, a truly present person is like an oasis in the desert. You might ask, what does it mean to have presence? It's not about charisma in the traditional sense. Charisma often relies on surface-level charm or performance. True presence, by contrast, emerges from authenticity, self-awareness, and an unwavering acceptance of who you are, both your brilliance and your flaws. Jung would argue that presence is a byproduct of psychological integration. When your conscious and unconscious minds are in dialogue, when your persona, the social mask, is informed by, but not enslaved to, the deeper self, you embody congruence. What you say, how you act, and who you are, these all align. People may not consciously understand it, but they feel it. They feel the weight of your reality, your groundedness. Think of the people in your life who simply make you feel calmer, safer, more reflective, simply by being in the same space. They don't even have to say much. Yet when you're near them, it feels as though their very existence stabilizes the environment. This is the gift of someone who needs no one to validate their being. They have become their own anchor, and in doing so, they anchor others. But here's what makes this presence so profound. It creates an invitation, not an imposition. When you're in the presence of such a person, you don't feel manipulated, judged, or coerced. Instead, you feel inspired to rise to the same level of integration. Their peace reflects your potential for peace. Their strength reminds you of the strength latent within yourself. Jung's idea of the self as an archetype of order, unity, and totality means that when you embody this state, you unconsciously emit an energetic template that others can resonate with. People seek you out not because you promise to fix them, but because being near you shows them that wholeness is possible. This is where needing no one becomes a form of quiet service to the world. You become a beacon, a lighthouse in the fog of modern anxiety and disconnection. Without trying to save anyone, you illuminate a path back to the self, not just for you, but for others who are ready to see it. Moreover, when you are present in this way, your interactions change fundamentally. You listen more deeply, because you're not listening just to respond or impress. You speak more deliberately because you're not speaking to perform. You exist more fully because you are no longer a collection of fragmented roles. You are a whole person, moving through life with intention. Jung also emphasized the importance of synchronicity, the idea that meaningful coincidences occur when we are aligned with the deeper currents of the psyche and the universe. When you carry true presence, synchronicities often increase. You meet the right people at the right time. Opportunities seem to flow more naturally. This isn't magic, it's resonance. The more integrated you are, the more your external world reflects that internal cohesion. In relationships, this presence is transformative. You no longer cling, demand, or control. Love becomes freer, friendships deeper, and conversations richer. Not because you're trying to make them so, but because your very being enhances the space around you. People feel they can be themselves around you because you have learned to fully be yourself. In the end, Jung's insights reveal that presence is the most powerful form of influence, precisely because it seeks nothing in return. You don't have to chase people when your presence speaks louder than words. You don't have to persuade when your wholeness is already persuasive. Thus, when you need no one, when you've anchored yourself in the completeness of the self, everyone needs you, not to complete them, but to remind them of their own forgotten wholeness. In becoming whole, you offer the world the greatest gift it could ever receive, the living example that it too can be whole. 6. The silent influence. Why wholeness commands respect. There is a kind of influence that doesn't announce itself, doesn't require authority, titles, or persuasive arguments. It is the influence of someone who is whole, someone who has journeyed inward, embraced their contradictions, and emerged as a unified self. Carl Jung's teachings illuminate this phenomenon. The more integrated you are, the more people unconsciously respect you. But why is that? At a psychological level, human beings are wired to respond to integrity, not in the moral sense alone, but in the literal sense of the word, to be whole and undivided. Jung taught that most people live in inner fragmentation, pulled between desires, personas, fears, and suppressed emotions. The average person carries hidden wars within themselves, often without even realizing it. They speak one thing and feel another. They present confidence but carry doubt. They love, yet withhold. When such fragmented individuals encounter someone who is internally coherent, they feel it before they can explain it. That person's very being reveals a sense of completeness that most are yearning for but cannot name. This is why wholeness commands respect, not through demand, but through silent resonance. It's not charisma, it's not manipulation. It is the silent authority of someone who has faced themselves fully and emerged intact. Jung's concept of the self is central here. The self, as the totality of the conscious and unconscious psyche, is the organizing principle that brings unity to the fragmented ego. When you align with the self, you operate from a depth that transcends superficial identity. You are not just a role, not just a profession, not just a set of curated traits. You are an entire, integrated being. That completeness is deeply attractive because it is rare. We often admire figures from history who exhibited this quality of wholeness. Think of leaders like Nelson Mandela or the Dalai Lama, individuals who, despite immense trials, radiated a calm, steadfast presence. They didn't command respect through force. They inspired it through the integrity of their being. Even in personal life, you might recall someone, a mentor, a grandparent, a teacher, whose advice landed with weight, not because of the words themselves, but because of who they were. This is why Jungian psychology insists on the importance of doing inner work. Without it, we remain in cycles of projection, blame, and unconscious behaviors. We project our unlived lives onto others. We idolize people to avoid facing our own undeveloped potentials. But when we do the work of integration, shadow work, inner child healing, self-reflection, we no longer need to project. We own who we are. And when you own yourself fully, people can't help but respect that. Respect here isn't about submission, it's about acknowledgement. Others may not like you, they may not even agree with you, but they will feel compelled to acknowledge your wholeness. Because deep down, we all recognize authenticity when we see it, even if it unsettles us. In relationships, this silent influence manifests as boundaries that don't need to be shouted. You don't have to assert your worth aggressively. Your very demeanor communicates that you are not available for disrespect. You don't have to beg for loyalty. Your presence elicits it naturally. People understand that mistreating you isn't just offensive, it feels like a betrayal of something sacred, even if they can't explain why. Jung warned, however, that wholeness is not the same as perfection. The integrated person is still human, still flawed, still learning. But what sets them apart is that they are conscious of their contradictions and have made peace with them. There is no pretense, no facade. This transparency breeds trust. In the professional world, this influence translates into leadership that doesn't rely on authority, but on authentic presence. Leaders who are internally coherent make decisions that reflect clarity, empathy, and confidence, not because they know everything, but because they are not afraid to confront the unknown within themselves. Their certainty is not arrogance. It is the quiet knowing that whatever arises, they have the inner resources to face it. This is the paradox that Jung alluded to time and again. When you no longer need anyone to affirm your worth, people will naturally affirm it, not through flattery or obligation, but through genuine respect. When you carry yourself with the integrity of someone who has integrated their inner world, you walk into any space already complete. And in a world of incomplete beings, completion is profoundly magnetic. So when we say, when you need no one, everyone needs you, it's not about becoming invulnerable or detached. It's about becoming so whole that your presence alone answers the unspoken question in others. Is it possible to be complete? And through you, the answer is yes. 7. Solitude as alchemy, how being alone transforms you. There is a secret that Carl Jung understood well, yet many people today still resist it. Solitude is not loneliness. In fact, it is in solitude that the greatest alchemy of the soul takes place. When we speak of needing no one and yet becoming the one everyone needs, it is solitude that serves as the crucible where this transformation occurs. Many fear solitude because it feels like abandonment, like a void that must be filled. We seek distractions, entertainment, or company, not because we truly need them, but because we're afraid of what we might find in the silence. Yet Jung insisted that only by embracing solitude can we begin the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Jung himself spent considerable time alone, reflecting, journaling, and engaging in what he called active imagination, a dialogue with the unconscious. He knew that to encounter the self, one must withdraw from the noise of the external world, even if only temporarily. In solitude, there is no one to mirror back the persona you perform daily. There is only you, naked, raw, unmasked. This is where the alchemy begins. Solitude forces you to confront your shadow, your unlived life, your buried desires, your hidden pains. At first, this can be deeply uncomfortable. Without the distractions of social roles, you may face feelings of inadequacy, shame, or fear. But these are not punishments. They are the psyche's way of showing you where healing is needed. As you sit with these feelings, as you stop running from them, something begins to shift. You realize that these uncomfortable parts are not enemies, they are messengers. The sadness, the anger, the emptiness, they are not defects, but signals pointing to what has been neglected within you. By facing them, by integrating them, you reclaim energy and vitality that were previously locked away. Over time, solitude becomes less of an exile and more of a homecoming. You begin to hear your own voice beneath the cacophony of others' expectations. You discover your values, your passions, your true nature, not as society defines it, but as it reveals itself within you. This is the gold of alchemy, the realization that you are already whole, that everything you sought in others was waiting within you all along. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Solitude is the doorway to that awakening. It is the space where dreams are transformed into insight, where unconscious patterns become conscious understanding. And in that understanding, you no longer need anyone to tell you who you are. You know. And when you know who you are, when you have stood alone and faced yourself, your presence changes irreversibly. You are no longer moved by trends, swayed by opinions, or desperate for validation. You don't need others to fill your time or distract you from yourself. Instead, your solitude becomes your sanctuary, a place you willingly return to for renewal and reflection. Here is the paradox. The person who is most comfortable alone is often the most sought after in company. Why? Because they bring a depth, a richness, an authenticity that others find rare and refreshing. They are not clinging, performing, or pretending. They are simply being, and that state of being is profoundly attractive. When you emerge from solitude, people sense something different in you. They may not articulate it, but they feel your centeredness, your peace. You become the calm in the storm, the stillness in the noise, and in a restless, distracted world, stillness is power. Furthermore, solitude gifts you with discernment. You no longer engage in relationships out of need, but out of genuine desire. You don't tolerate shallow connections because you are no longer afraid of being alone. You can say no without guilt, yes without desperation. This self-possession makes your relationships healthier, more balanced, more meaningful. Jung's wisdom teaches us that solitude is not a retreat from life. It is preparation for it. The time you spend alone is not time wasted. It is time invested in knowing yourself, so that when you do step into the world, you do so as a whole person, not a fragment searching for completion. Thus, when you need no one, it is often because you have walked the solitary path and found your own light. And when others see that light, when they feel the peace and strength you carry, they are naturally drawn to you, not because you seek them, but because you no longer do. 8. The paradox fulfilled. Why the whole person becomes irresistible. At this point in our journey, we've uncovered the deep psychology behind why needing no one leads to being needed by many. Through Jung's lens of individuation, shadow integration, presence, and solitude, a profound truth emerges. The world is irresistibly drawn to those who are whole, not because they seek attentions, but because their very being resonates with a frequency most people have forgotten within themselves. This is the great paradox that confounds so many. Our culture teaches us to accumulate followers, likes, friends, and admirers by constantly seeking. We are told to project, to brand ourselves, to network endlessly. Yet as Jung showed us, true magnetism does not arise from pursuit. It arises from completion, from the still, quiet power of someone who no longer needs to chase because they have already arrived within themselves. When you reach this point of inner integration, something subtle yet undeniable shifts in how others perceive you. People sense that you are not seeking to get something from them, whether it's love, validation, attention, or praise. Instead, you exude a fullness that feels safe, inspiring, and even healing. In a world starving for authenticity, your wholeness becomes a form of sustenance. Jung pointed to this dynamic when he explored the concept of the self as the central archetype, the unifying principle of the psyche. The self is not ego. It is the totality that holds all your contradictions, all your complexities, in harmonious balance. When you embody the self, you don't deny your flaws, nor do you inflate your virtues. You stand in acceptance of all that you are, and this acceptance radiates outward. It's important to clarify. Needing no one doesn't mean isolating yourself or rejecting human connection. On the contrary, it means you connect from a place of choice, not compulsion. Your relationships are richer because they are not born from desperation. They are cultivated from mutual respect, shared values, and authentic presence. People feel this. They may not understand it consciously, but they feel the difference between someone who wants to share space with them versus someone who needs them to feel complete. This is why the person who has embraced solitude, faced their shadow, integrated their psyche, and aligned with their self, often becomes a beacon in their community. They don't have to advertise their strength. It is felt. They don't have to proclaim their wisdom. It is evident in how they move through life. They don't have to seek admiration. It is freely given. Think of it like this. Most people walk around with empty cups, hoping others will pour into them. But when you filled your own cup, you carry an overflow that others instinctively wish to drink from. Your wholeness doesn't diminish you. It replenishes you, allowing you to give without depletion, to love without losing yourself, to lead without dominating. Jung's path of individuation isn't just for the select few. It is an invitation to everyone. It asks us to stop running from ourselves, to confront the darkness within, to reclaim the parts of us we've abandoned. It is an invitation to become whole, not for the sake of being needed by others, but because being whole is the highest expression of what it means to be human. And yet, as a beautiful byproduct, when you no longer need anyone, the world notices. It leans in, curious, captivated, wondering what it is you found and whether they too can find it within themselves. So the next time you feel invisible, overlooked, or disconnected, don't chase. Instead, turn inward. Begin the work of integration, of shadow embracing, of solitude sitting. And in time, you will find that you've become the very person others seek, not because you need them, but because you have become a living reminder of what it means to be whole. As Jung might remind us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And when you do, you won't need anyone to see you because your wholeness will be too radiant to ignore. And there we have it, fellow travelers of the mind. The paradox of needing no one, yet becoming the one everyone needs. Carl Jung's wisdom shows us that wholeness is not a destination, but a lifelong practice of turning inward, embracing the shadow, and standing complete within ourselves. The more we cultivate that inner fullness, the less we seek, and the more the world naturally responds. Remember, the light you've been searching for in others has always lived inside you. Thank you for joining us on this deep and reflective journey here on Galactic Wisdom. If this exploration stirred something within you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you found this perspective valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode where we unravel the mysteries of the psyche, the soul, and the universe. Until next time, stay curious, stay whole, and as always, keep seeking the wisdom that's already written in the stars.